Hey, everybody, it is Trags Mike Petralia alongside Richard Skinner, Skinny of Local 12 in Cincinnati. We are both here on site at Acrisure Stadium. Skinny is upstairs in a broadcast booth. I am down in the bowels, as they say, of Acrisure, actually right next to the Bengals locker room and the press conference room, where there were smiles abound, Skinny, after a nail-biting 19-17 win over the Pittsburgh Steelers here late on Saturday night in the wind and the bitter cold. The Bengals live for at least another day in the NFL season. As a matter of fact, their playoff hopes extend into the final day of the season as they are looking now for help from Aaron Rodgers and the Jets over Miami and Carson Wentz and the Chiefs over the Denver Broncos. And if those two things happen, Chiefs and the Jets both win, they are back in the playoffs. But first things first, what happened here Saturday night, really remarkable in terms of the way the Bengals were able to hold on the road when it seemed like they were leaking a little bit of oil at the end, Skinny.
Yeah, it almost felt like it was going to be the appropriate ending to the season, right? That a season of close losses, disappointing losses that, just one more. Because at 19-7 in the fourth quarter, it honestly felt like this was over. Pittsburgh's offense had 91 yards at that point in the game. This is the same Pittsburgh offense that rolled up 520 against these guys just 5 weeks ago. And so you thought, okay, 19-7's enough. And then Pittsburgh in 3 minutes goes down and scores with 8 minutes still to go to cut it to 5. And now it's, okay, now you got to get the offense going again. And they never really did. Then the defense forces a punt. And you're thinking, okay, a couple of first downs right out the clock, you're fine. Instead, the punt ends up hitting DJ Ivy in the foot, and Pittsburgh recovers, puts him in territory to maybe go down and score the touchdown to take the lead. Defense comes up big again and holds them to a field goal, 19-17. Then you have to punt it away one more time at the 2-minute warning. Pittsburgh has no timeouts. Their clock management was horrifically bad in that last drive. One of many decisions that Pittsburgh made that weren't very good, including the end of the half sequence we'll get to. And the Bengals defense comes up with a stop. And, listen, this season has been a disappointment to a large degree, as Joe Burrow said after the game. Not making the playoffs is a disappointing season, and they still have a chance. But if they don't, he would consider it still a disappointing season. But at 4-8, the only thing you can do is win out and hope. And you've got it down to hope of 2 games at 4:25 on Sunday that aren't complete long shots, aren't completely far-fetched, but it's the best you could do. You did your part, which was win this game tonight, no matter how ugly it was at times.
Yeah, and I think what's really, I think, appreciated by a lot of people in that Bengals locker room is the fact that, yes, Joe Burrow got this team off on the right foot. He had an MVP caliber season, no question about it, but he was literally banged up toward the end of this game. It was a scary moment where he looked like a Steeler came down on his neck and wrenched it pretty good. He picked up a big face guard full of Acrisure Field turf in his face mask. He had to go over to the medical tent, get checked out, go through the protocol because he was complaining of his neck. After the game, actually, Burrow said it's the first time in his career he's really was scared there for 10 to 15 seconds. But Burrow wasn't the main story tonight. Trey Hendrickson in the defense was. Trey Hendrickson finished with 3.5 sacks in this game, 17.5 sacks, and barring something completely unforeseen like Danielle Hunter of Houston finishing with like 5 sacks on Sunday against the Tennessee Titans, Trey Hendrickson will become the first Bengal ever to lead the National Football League in sacks. Defense was the story here on Saturday night.
Yes, and we have to use the caveat, since sacks became an official statistic in
Coy Bacon, 22,
yep.
1976.
That's correct. But officially that is correct. No, and listen, count me in that camp of the last 4 games. The defense, I'll agree to say they've played better, but it was also Cooper Rush and Will Levis and Dorian Thompson-Robinson and a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, who's had a great season, as we know. And he might be playing in the playoffs if he leads his team to a win over Kansas City. But you haven't faced a who's who, and you really don't face a who's who in Russell Wilson in this offense. It's been really pedestrian of late. But this was also an offense that torched you for 520, right? We're not talking 520 3 months ago when there were 9,000 different parts. No, we're talking just 5 weeks ago when most of the parts for both teams are pretty much the same. And kudos to the Bengals defense for rising up tonight and a 300 and some odd yard difference. Again, they had 91 yards going into the fourth quarter. That's insane.
Yeah, it's just remarkable. And remarkable to me that the Steelers didn't go to Pat Fryermuth until it felt like midway through the third quarter when their offense started getting heated up. But the other thing I noticed tonight, Skinny, the Bengals did a much better job of wrapping up the dump-offs that Lou Anarumo was concerned about going into this game and certainly was concerned about after watching the tape on December 1st after that game. They didn't allow all of that free yardage on short dump-off passes.
Yeah, I think they gave up 110 yards in checkdowns, just simple checkdowns. It's a simple dump-off pass. They gave up 110 yards in that first meeting. I believe they gave up 270 yards after the catch in that first meeting, and that just didn't occur tonight. I thought they did a really good job on Pickens, and maybe some of that's on Pickens himself. He got a couple knocked loose when it looked like he was about to make a catch, and a defender would knock it loose. But he had one catch for this. Hang on, let me see if I can do it right. This many yards, 0 yards. I mean, thank you. 0 yards. That's getting it done. And honestly, the quick Pittsburgh touchdown drive in the fourth quarter was a little troublesome because it happened so fast and they were getting chunk plays there. But really, the other touchdown drive was aided by Josh Newton not finding a ball on third down on a deep pass, which all he does is get his head around. And he did that, if you remember, Mike, in the fourth quarter to knock away a pass.
Pickens. Yeah, actually, I think it was Pickens. Yeah.
I think you're right. And then on that drive, the first scoring drive, there were 2 pass interference calls. One I thought was correct. One I thought was a little bit iffy. The one in the end zone on Cam Taylor-Britt, or that drive doesn't get going for the most part. So no, I think the defense ends on a high note. We can debate this moving forward at some point. Is it enough to save Lou Anarumo even if they don't make the playoffs? And I guess we'll find that out pretty quickly. But this is going to be really, by the time people see this podcast, an interesting next few hours for this Bengals team to either figure out it's going to Buffalo to play or then start answering offseason questions come Monday.
I think it was Paul Dehner Jr. who asked point blank to Trey Hendrickson after the game, do you want to see Lou Anarumo come back? Do you think, what are your thoughts on Lou Anarumo? And he said, that's not my decision, but I love the man. I love what he's been able to do in terms of motivating us here over the final 5 weeks of the season. I love what he's been able to do over the course of several years that I've played for him. Obviously, I think a lot of players on that roster think the world of Lou Anarumo. And that's why I think, there's probably very quietly, some regret that they didn't play harder, perhaps with more urgency, more production earlier in the season. You're talking about 9-8 right now. Maybe the Bengals win 2 more of those games and you're looking at 11-7, or I'm sorry, my math is terrible. 11-6. Let's say 11-6. We're not having that conversation.
No,
We're
right.
talking about how the Bengals are getting ready to face the best of the best in the AFC playoffs again. But instead, Bengals have to wait on a couple of games on Sunday, and then if they're not fortunate enough, then you start to look at what kind of retooling can happen on the coaching staff.
Yeah, no question. And we'll probably find some of those answers out pretty quickly on Monday. If they don't make the playoffs, Monday will be locker cleanup day, a clean-out day. And that's, as we know, Monday in the NFL a lot of times is known as Black Monday, if you will, when coaches get fired, mostly head coaches, but sometimes other guys on staffs get fired. So we may find out some things as quickly as Monday. We may not find out anything if we can't get to the stadium because of the impending snowstorm.
Yeah, that thought crossed my mind too, Skinny.
Yeah,
don't worry about that.
Yeah, that may be the case as well. So, yeah, I mean, there still are a lot of off-season questions to answer, even if this team does make the playoffs. And we've talked a lot about those on this podcast as the season's gone on. It just feels weird to where the bottoming out looked like it was in that first Pittsburgh game, the 44-38 game that left them at 4-8 and pretty much left them for dead. And even players at that point were talking like, hey, we're not even thinking about the playoffs. We just think about trying to win a game. And you look up and 5 weeks later, you've won 5 in a row to get to 9-8. And that was part of the line of questioning of Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow, and players in the locker room, those first 2 guys at the podium of, what does it say about, kind of the character of this team and the character of that locker room? And I think it does speak volumes of that. I know it's going to sound hokey of, well, you should have done more earlier. Sure, you should have done more earlier. Shouldn't have lost to the New England Patriots. Turn one of those wonky close games around, and to your point, That's all you are 11-6, and you're probably going to as the 5 seed to play Houston at Houston, and a chance to take a step forward there and win a playoff game. As Zach said, I don't think anybody wants to see them in these playoffs. I think he's right. I mean, I can guarantee you nobody wants to see this team in the playoffs, but you may not have to if they don't make it.
They're not going to want us in this tournament. Promise you. I promise you. Zach Taylor after the game. He also said we're capable of anything. And
he's right.
Yeah, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that and maybe a little expansion on those thoughts, Skinny. This team, based on what Zach Taylor said and the way they played the last 5 weeks, I think he's right. If they get in, they can do some real damage starting in Buffalo.
Yeah, I think the only scary part to that, Mike, would be how beat up you are. I mean, will you get an Amarius Mims back for that? Chase Brown, you probably will get back for that, but then T leaves tonight's game, and we don't see him come back in, and that's been kind of an ongoing thing. They've been trying to manage it. I'm not so sure how right Burrow is after the game either, to be honest with you. I mean, he didn't look very good, down the stretch throwing the football. Some of that, again, you can give them a lot of credit to Pittsburgh.
And the weather.
I'll give you all those things. But, again, it feels like this team got a little beat up in a couple of places again tonight. Cody Ford gutted it out after he hurt his chest and had to be taken out of the game. And then, Mims gave it the old college try, and he really wasn't. I mean, you talk about an emergency moment. That was what that was for Mims. I know I saw some stuff on my Twitter timeline where fans were like, yeah, I need to make that change. Well, no, they didn't need to make it. They had to make it because Cody Ford was hurt. Once Cody Ford said, I can go back in the game, they took Amarius out because he wasn't healthy enough to really play. So the one thing I would tell you is there are sometimes that there are teams that are stuck in other teams' heads, and the Bengals have the Bills' number a little bit. I think this is a really good Bills team. In my opinion, I think it's their time in the AFC. It just feels right for all the things that have come together for them. The fact that they did beat Kansas City, although they'll have to go back to Kansas City in the AFC Championship game. But, yeah, I mean, it's not like the Bengals haven't gone to Buffalo and won a playoff game before against a Buffalo team that was seated higher than them because that's why they had to go to Buffalo to play them.
And that's why I think Zach Taylor said they don't want to see us. I can promise you that. And I think he's right.
I think he is
but
too.
But the Cards, as Jamar Chase had maybe one of the lines of postgame, and I'll read it to you. He said, we just have to let the dice roll, take our chances, and see how everything plays out on Sunday. That perfectly sums it up.
Yeah, that's all
They've rolled that. All they can do now is let the other players at the table roll the dice. Jamar Chase, speaking of the Bengals' top receiver, didn't really, when he was speaking with Bengals play-by-play man Dan Horde after the game, he didn't really want to talk about the record-tying 17 touchdowns. He caught the 17th tonight against the Steelers. You know why that is, Skinny?
I don't.
That is because he dropped 2 in the last 2 weeks, meaning the one that certainly he dropped against the Denver Broncos. It was in the end zone. I think they had to settle for the field goal then.
Yep.
And I think he was being a little hard on himself. But
the one tonight.
The one tonight, it was tall, but he thought, look, if I get my hands on that ball, that should not have gone through my hands. That's a touchdown.
I saw it go through his hands, but I don't know if you were one of the ones because those of us that we all kind of sit close to each other. There were a couple of our reporter friends that actually thought he caught it, and it looked like he did for a second. I actually had binoculars on, so I could see that it did go through his hands, but I could see how people could see that because there was no real negative reaction initially from him on that, and you kind of got blocked out by the defender. And yeah, I think to your point, I think he is being a little harsh on himself, but I think that's what makes him a great player. He's one of those ones. I got my hands on it, I should catch it, right?
Yeah, 19 sounds better, though, is what he told,
he
told Dan. And, the thing I like about talking with Jamar Chase after a game, Skinny, is the fact that you really get the genuine answers. He's not pulling any punches. Yep. If he's pissed off, he's going to let you know he's pissed off. If he's, happy and satisfied with the team winning, even if he didn't have a great game, kind of like tonight, because I believe he had 10 catches, but did not get to 100 yards. The team won the game, and he had the most genuine smile on his face when Dan Horde started the conversation by saying that you're still alive in the playoff hunt going into the final day. To me, that tells me a lot about the character of the athlete.
Yeah, I mean, and here's a guy who's noted for his big playability, right? Well, Pittsburgh didn't let them get In fact, they didn't have a pass play of over 20 yards tonight. He had 10 catches for 96 yards, which means you're also getting beat up after that, right? The physicality of those little short 6-yard curls or 7-yard slants, and you're just getting third. And he just bounces back up and keeps going. I think it's also a testament to his toughness.
All right, move on to the other very popular receiver in that locker room, T. Higgins. And he was asked by the NFL Network what he thought of the unknown of that could have been his last game as a Cincinnati Bengal. And he said it kind of sucks because he doesn't know. But if it is, obviously I want to wish the best to my guys because they were great teammates for the last 4 years in Cincinnati. And when he was asked, would you return to Cincinnati? He said, absolutely. I'm very comfortable in this city. And of his future, he said, hopefully it can be here, but if it's not, I wish the best to all my guys. So what did you think of those comments?
Yeah, no, I think the one thing I really admired about T, and I still go back to OTAs this year, was like 2 weeks, or maybe it was last year. I guess it was last year's OTAs, where he's in the final year of his initial rookie contract. They didn't get anything really negotiated at that point. And I even said to him, if you remember, Mike, he missed like a week, maybe the first week or two of OTAs.
Yes.
They're voluntary. And then he showed up, and the first thing I asked was, what are you doing here? And he looked at me with a puzzlement, and he said, I'm here to work on my craft. I'm a football player. I got to come play football. And I'm like, okay. And I thought he handled all of this stuff this year about as well as you could handle it. You can't tell me a player wants to be franchise tagged. That being said, I'm not here to tell you that that's not what the Bengals should have done, because it's part of the collective bargaining agreement. And if you don't like it, go complain to your union rep, man. But
it's part of the business, yes.
It's part of the business. Doesn't mean, though, as a human being, that you aren't either offended by that, taken aback by that, upset by that because you wanted some kind of long-term deal. And he handled, I think, this whole season as a professional. You remember when he opened up to ESPN's Ben Baby about, people were in the Twitterverse were mumbling about, he's making business decisions. Remember when he missed a couple of games around the year? I think that really hurt him because I don't think that's what he's about at all. I do think he's injury prone, and I think that's another argument we can all have about whether to re-sign him or not and at what money. But I think that really, really hurt him because that's not what he is. He wants to play football.
And the other thing, the irony of what happened tonight is, how did his season end? With an injury. Tweaked his left ankle,
right.
Couldn't play the fourth quarter, but he was out there doing everything he could. I believe he had 4 catches for 53 yards was the number. So he still was a significant part of the offense until he got hurt late in the third quarter.
Let me read a quick Joe Burrow quote about him because he was asked directly about T in the post game as well. And he said, the question was, would you want him to come back and play? And he said, well, number one, we started this whole thing together. We came in together. We built this thing from the ground up. You don't want to make a habit of letting great players get out of the building, like I said earlier in the week. T's a great player and a guy that does everything the right way and works really hard for it. When you have a guy like that, you just can't let him get out of the building. He's a one-of-a-kind person, one-of-a-kind player, and one that we really count on as an integral part of what we do around here. Hopefully we can make that happen. And I think that's a genuine comment from Joe Burrow.
Do you think there's any more urgency than there was earlier in the week, last week, when he said essentially the same thing? Because when you say that after the season finale, which certainly could be, obviously,
yep.
I think it carries some weight. What happened with Jermaine Burton and him not making the trip to Pittsburgh, obviously he has some serious personal issues that he's dealing with. I don't think we're speaking out of line by putting it in that context right there and in that framework. Jermaine Burton's future with the Bengals is absolutely up in the air. Huge, huge question mark. We haven't seen much from Charlie Jones over the last couple of years. That leaves you pretty much, if you let T get out of the building, it's Jamar, it's Andre Yosivas, and then
who?
What do you got?
No, that's a fair point. I mean, you literally will have to go spend a high draft pick on a wide receiver, and you might do that anyway for all I know. But if you're looking to address some other spots, you would hope that if you have T. Higgins signed and you have Jamar Chase and Yoshi, I didn't think he had a great year. It wasn't awful. It wasn't certainly dynamic, and maybe that's not what it was supposed to be. You don't have to go high for a wide receiver. Maybe there's a veteran floating around that can become your third or fourth guy. We saw multiple tight end sets, so you don't always have to have 3 wide receivers on the field either. And Chase Brown became such a weapon that I don't think you felt like you needed another dynamic receiver out there as well. So, but to your point, if it's not, then you are really stuck just in filling out that room.
Oh, there's no question. And that leads me into my next topic, Mike Gesicki. Towards the end of this season, I thought he became more and more valuable to Joe Burrow. Certainly in those stretches where the Bengals didn't have T. Higgins, when they had other injuries, when they didn't have Chase Brown tonight, they certainly turned to Mike Gesicki early in the game. He was very, very productive. As I mentioned on that first touchdown drive, the only Bengals touchdown drive of the night, I thought he was very good. What did you think of Mike Gesicki this year?
He disappeared for a period of time, right? It felt weird. Remember the Kansas City game, and I think we all wrote about the multiple tight ends, and it's opening up things for this offense, and Gesicki was a big part of it that day. And then all of a sudden, he kind of just disappeared. I don't know if that was by design, if that was via injury stuff, or because Eric All started to play so well, they felt like, hey, we got a 3-down tight end. We're going to use the 3-down tight end because he can block, which is not Mike's strong suit. But then when push came to shove and they needed another weapon in the pass game, it was Mike Gesicki. And it felt like so many big third downs or clutch conversions went his way. I mean, he winds up having a season in which he catches over 60 balls for over 600 yards. First Bengals tight end for over 600 yards is Tyler Eifert. I mean, that's something to sneeze at.
It's a remarkable number. I'm going to leave you, Skinny, with this quote from Trey Hendrickson. Winning 9 games in the NFL and having a winning record is a tough thing to do, and we should take pride in that fact. And the Bengals have finished with a winning record for a 4th straight year. That's second only to the 5-year run between 2011 and 2015 when the Bengals went to the playoffs all 5 of those years, of course. They had winning records each year. But, again, the Bengals are and Zach Taylor 1 year away, 1 season away from matching that. That is something, I guess, to take some pride in, if indeed, Skinny, this was their final game of 2024.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Pittsburgh touts Mike Tomlin's streak of winning seasons, right? And rightfully so. It is hard to win in this league. People may not want to hear that or believe it, but it is. And to your point, Mike, this franchise started in 1968. They've only had one streak longer than 3 seasons in a row, the one you pointed to, the 11 through 15, until now. I don't think that's anything to sneeze at, to be honest with you. It shows, just kind of how consistent they've been at times over the last 4 seasons. And it is hard to win in this league. And it's also a testament to Joe Burrow. Mike, I do want to touch on one other thing tonight. And listen, this offensive line takes its knocks, and some of it is, unfortunately, Joe Burrow does at time hold the ball a long time, and then a sack comes. There was one in the one he got hurt on. He danced away from pressure, tried to keep the play alive, and he's talked about this a ton. Low red zone, I don't mind taking a sack. I want to try to make the play go as long as the play can go. And then, unfortunately, he took a hard hit. But do you know what T.J. Watt did tonight, Mike? Do you know what his stat line was tonight?
No, he had 1 sack, and that's it.
No,
right?
he didn't, because they got wiped out by a penalty, remember? It was a holding penalty.
That is right. That is right. T.J. Watt did not have a sack tonight.
He had nothing tonight. He didn't record a single solitary stat tonight.
I'll tell you what, and this is why Zach Taylor brought it up in the postgame presser, and I think Jeff Hobson brought it up from Bengals.com also. Cody Ford doesn't get talked about a lot, but he should tonight, because what he did, what he was able to do pretty much most of the night, keeping T.J. Watt in check, pretty remarkable job.
No question. And here's the guy who was he started at left tackle when Orlando got hurt. They tried to make, when they felt like they were healthy, when Mims was back and Cordell Volson was struggling, they moved him to left guard, and then unfortunately then the injuries occurred. Now Cody Kitt's at the right tackle. So he started 3 spots along that offensive line this year. He might have got some snaps at one point at right guard as a backup in a game, if I remember right. I might be wrong on that, but he's done it before. I know that. I mean, you talk about a versatile guy. That smacks of versatility to be able to do all the things that he did. And kudos to him. Again, you didn't bring him in here to be a starter. I mean, he was brought in here to be a backup, and yet he's gotten thrust into starting a lot of games this season in 3 different spots. I think that does speak a lot of Cody Ford.
Well, it's going to be kind of a surreal Sunday, I think, Skinny. A lot of people are going to watch this podcast, listen to this podcast, download this podcast, and then they're going to get ready to watch the Dolphins and Jets. They're going to get ready to watch the Broncos and Chiefs. I'm going to be the optimist and say the Bengals, just because I don't feel like this season can end this way yet.
Yeah, it's weird.
I think they're going to get the two things to work out. Look, I don't know if I'm talking myself into this, but I hearken back to the 1989 Bengals when they needed that Miami win, or the Patriots to win on the Monday night, and they didn't get it. And
that was 86. I think that was 86. 89 was when they lost on
Monday
Christmas
night.
Eve on Monday night to Minnesota. That's when they
right.
actually did control their own destiny. The one you're thinking of, I think, is the one where they didn't get to control their own
86.
destiny. Yeah.
Yes. So, maybe the football gods will turn one in the favor of the Bengals. What do you think happens Sunday?
I talked myself into neither one of the teams the Bengals needed to win winning. I watched the Jets for a bit last week because we had Sunday off because of the Saturday game, and I watched a little bit of the Bills and Jets, and it felt like the Jets had just quit. But the more this week has gone on, with even Aaron Rodgers talking about this could be my last game in the NFL, I don't think he's going to want to go out like that. I think that gives everybody on that team maybe something to play for. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they hate Aaron Rodgers' guts for all I know. Maybe he's just been nothing but a true pain in the ass, and they're like, dude, I don't care if it's your last game. It's your last game. That's your problem. But something just tells me that he's got one game left under him that he can magically pull out. Again, it is Spencer. It is Snoop Huntley quarterbacking. They weren't exactly dynamic offensively up in Cleveland last week. The only thing I can say, though, for those who are probably thinking in the terms of, man, Kansas City's not playing starters, it is still Steve Spagnuolo against a rookie quarterback. I know they've played once already this season, so he's seen some of it. Something tells me he keeps that defense keeps them in the game. And then the question is, does the kid crack? Do the Broncos crack? Because, hey, you talk about pressure on them. They haven't been to the playoffs in a while. They had their opportunity against the Bengals to just play for a tie and couldn't get it done. What if this game is close? Is it, we're not going to get in? We've had two chances at this. I think it's going to make for a really interesting Sunday.
So that's what I think could wind up happening, Skinny, is the fact that it's not necessarily the Chiefs going out and beating up the Broncos. It's the Broncos just wetting the bed, if you will, and not getting the job done. Yeah. Hey, Skinny, if this is our final post game, it's been nothing but a thrill.
Yeah, I loved it.
It's been nothing but fun. A special treat to be able to work with you. And for all the times that you give me grief in the press box, and that's never.
I do it with love, Mike.
Yes, you do. You do. You very much do. You have the seniority on me, and I won't ever let you forget that.
No, I really enjoyed it very much. I'm glad we got to do this. There were some logistical stuff for both of us during the course of this season, especially with these night games of finding places to do this podcast, times to do this podcast. I know we've done them from hotel rooms at 4 o'clock in the morning. We've done them in darkness, if you can recall. I can't remember where was the darkness one. I can't remember.
That was L.A.
That
was Chargers in the workroom, in the printing room.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm just waiting for the lights to go out.
I know.
Here
so am I. Yeah, so am I.
But that was in the workroom of SoFi Stadium, up in the press box.
Yeah.
And that's one of the memories I will take from this 2020
Me as well.
season.
But we made it work. We trudged through it, and it was really enjoyable. I had a lot of fun doing it, Mike. Thanks so much.
Well, here's hoping that the lights don't go out on the Bengals on Sunday. We will see what happens in the two late games in the 4:25 p.m. Eastern time window. Everybody, I want to thank you for following us all season long, and certainly if the Bengals advance to the postseason, we will be in Buffalo. We know that if the Bengals make the playoffs, they are going to Buffalo to take on the Bills, and that will be sometime next weekend. But, of course, stay tuned to local12.com. Skinny will have you covered there. CLNS Cincy with a Y.com. I'll have you covered there, as well as on the X, Local 12 Skinny, as well as me at Trags, TRAGS. Again, the final here in Acrisure Stadium, the Bengals 19 and the Steelers 17. For Richard Skinny, my name is Mike Petralia, Trags, and this has been the regular season finale edition of the Jungle Roar Skinny Bengals postgame pod.